Welcome to the Estate Made Simple podcast with Jenna Carvalho and Gordon VanderLeek. We are on a mission to simplify the world of estate administration, helping executors gain the knowledge required to manage an estate. Please note, the following is for informational purposes only and is not to be considered legal, tax, or financial advice. We recommend you seek individualized advice for your unique situation with qualified professionals.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Estates Made Simple. Today, we are diving into guiding principles when exercising discretion. Executors and their roles as executor need to exercise discretion for a variety of different decisions through the course of administration. It can range from deciding what sort of vendor to choose for the lawn care, to what tax elections to make on the final return, to when you're distributing assets and when and how much to distribute. So there's lots of different decisions that need to be made. And we just wanted to drill down on the guiding principles around making those decisions to protect your liability and also increase and maximize the value of the estate. So I will ask you, Gord, first question is, what top advice would you give executors when they are faced with making a discretionary decision on behalf of the estate?
So I think my starting point would be you have to take a step back from how you normally might make a decision to say you've got to be objective. You got to take into account all considerations. An example on the investment side of it would be, what about a choice of the investment advisor? Do you just default to the person who has been the deceased investment advisor, or do you need what about any due diligence about looking at their track record and do they have the necessarily their expertise? Just falling into, well, let's say you're doing it for mom or dad who had passed away. I'm going to use the same investment advisor. Is the person facing discipline with their governing body? Do they go to continuing education? Do they know what they're doing, right? Have they maximized investment returns over the years? Is this a good choice? Do they understand and can give advice regarding the role of an executor or a trustee under a trust, those sorts of things, right? Just, for example, defaulting to this is the person mom and dad has always used would not necessarily be discharging your responsibilities for that. So it's putting the thought to saying, who is the best person? And it might be that, but it could be other people as well. What fees are they charging? So not just asking the pertinent questions about who is the best choice, versus just defaulting to the status quo or existing people that are there and asking for their plan of how would they do their jobs. We see sometimes in the context of government X or construction projects, there's a bidding process, right? You might say, I'm going to get a few different people to give me some options and to put a plan together, and then you make a decision having considered. So that means you're not just going, say, I really like this person, I want to work with them, but you're taking a step back and saying, I'm going to get competing quotes. I'm going to look at qualifications and ask the questions that are maybe not so obvious, but this helps to document your decision making that you've considered options and you didn't blindly go with the first option that was in front of you. With regard to that, if you have to sell mom and dad's house, do you get your friend who's the realtor to do it, or should you get some competing quotes? Who's the person with the most knowledge in this neighborhood? Who's got the best marketing plan? What about the rates they're going to charge? That's maybe not a great example because the real estate fees tend to be the same, but you've got to ask in each case. So you can ultimately say to the beneficiaries, I investigated options and this was the best choice. I guess that's the short answer to what I've been talking about is you have options and you want to investigate those options and put some thought to what the best choice is for the various decisions that you're going to make. And the court protects you from, if there happens to be an expense in the estate that was unexpected or a decline in the value that's outside of your control. If you think of investments like the market changed suddenly and dropped, you're not responsible because the market dropped, but you are responsible for saying, did you pick an investment advisor who was mindful of what happens in the event the market drops, as an example with regard to that. So exercising the discretion means you have to be objective. You have to look at various options and investigate alternatives and then put some due process, put some thought into what is the best choice of the available choices, which usually means you need more than one choice, right? So you can get several quotes for the work that needs to be done.
And I would say another recommendation along the same lines is to discuss the options with beneficiaries. Perhaps not the small minutia decisions, but the larger decisions that could greatly change the value of the estate. It doesn't hurt to convey the decisions with the beneficiaries, seek their input, and then make an informed decision based on their thoughts as well. Because if you have consent amongst all the beneficiaries, I think the decision-making process is a lot simpler. And then the other component, of course, is to seek advice and direction when you need it. So from legal, tax, financial professionals, executors are not required to know everything about everything, but they are required to seek help when they need it. And you mentioned how the court are lenient on executors if they've had a process and things happen outside their control. And I think, if they have a documentation showing that they've sought outside advice and relied on the advice of professionals, that definitely will help in any sort of claim against the executor if a mistake or if a drop in value of the estate is done.
Yeah, an example might be if you have some artwork that's in the estate, is it appropriate to get it appraised and not just say that doesn't look like very good art? It's not your opinion of whether you think that's a valuable piece of art. It would be get it appraised. And then if you sell it based on appraised value, you can say, well, this is what it's worth. It wasn't just my opinion. If there's a motor vehicle, oftentimes people pass away owning a vehicle. What's the vehicle worth? You may have a gut feel, but it's probably not a bad idea to say, let's hire an appraiser, somebody who will actually make a determination of what this is so you can document your file that you weren't relying on, oh, I think that 2022 Ford F-150 is worth this. You had it appraised, you sought an expert, or this piece of artwork that might be quite valuable because you know nothing about the artist or what its fair market value. So go to an art gallery and say, what's this worth? Get it appraised. Those sorts of things would be appropriate to get that expert advice. So I really like that point you're making is don't rely on your own judgment. If you have no idea, that sort of almost lends itself to, of course, you're going to go out and find somebody who knows something. The danger is when you think you know something about it and you don't document that you've actually done some of this due diligence, right? Or what are my choices for the best person to be able to sell this particular item? And that's where you can hire other people to do that. We've had other podcasts where we've brought people on to talk about disposing of personal property, right? So there's people who do this for a living, they can guide you and help you to make good decisions, and that'll mitigate against the risk. I also really what you're saying about checking with the beneficiaries. How I like to frame that is it's not so much that it'd be good to get their opinion, but if you say, this is what I'm going to do, it's less about you allowing them to act as executors. You're still the one that has to make the decision. But if you communicate, here's the options and here's where I'm going, this is the plan, you're going to invite them to object to that or to have some input, which you can take into account. Maybe that's really useful input. So you don't want to ignore that. But by the same token, you don't want to suggest that they have control over the process, but you can definitely mitigate your risk if you're communicating with them as to what has to be done. Here's your plan. Here's the research you've done. And if no one's objecting to that, then that provides some comfort that it's nothing controversial in that regard. So another point would be to also document the decisions you're making and the process you're going through. I think what's really easy to do is just to make a whole pile of decisions over the course of the administration of the estate, which could happen over years, but not actually document the process you went through. If you agree with some of what we said earlier, Jenna, if our listeners are saying, yeah, these are all great ideas and they're implementing them, but then 18 months later, there's a fight with the beneficiaries about the decisions that are being made. Are you going to remember all that stuff? Do you have it properly? Do you have all those emails saved? So I just want to also just emphasize, do the right process, but also documented it. Just make a quick note. Here's the decision I made. Here's the options I did. And here's the conclusion I reached. You'll be thankful you did that. In my example, 18 months later, because are you going to be able to recreate that just from your memory? And you're going to forget these things. And then that's going to open up for liability. So documenting the whole process and your discussions, particularly with beneficiaries, as you highlighted, I think can be important.
And the one word that comes to mind when I think about all we've discussed is the word thoughtful. Just be thoughtful in your approach, be thoughtful with your decisions, and do not take it lightly because you're in an important role and you are acting on behalf of the deceased. So we hope that this conversation provides value to you today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you next time.